Hey, what's going on guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be reviewing the TYR DropZero Barefoot Trainer. So 3 pros that I have with the DropZero Barefoot Trainer, gosh that name, is number 1, the outsole does have a good amount of grip. Now this outsole, if you are powerlifting, strength training, or even doing some cross training on different surfaces, should give you enough grip. You have this TYRTac outsole, which is basically TYR's like proprietary means of giving this outsole its own kind of like spice and its own proprietary grip, and overall it's done a pretty good job. You also have a nice lateral sidewall here, and you do have it come up on the medial side as well, so this outsole does wrap around the foot, giving you additional lateral support. So if that's something you're after, I think you'll be pretty well suited in this model regarding its grip and its functionality, giving you more support. The second pro that I have with this model is if you're somebody that loves booty style construction shoes, and so if you just want a shoe that you could slip on and off, this model does a pretty good job with the power straps up here. It's very easy to get on and off. There's not a ton of work with the shoe, and there's no relacing obviously because you're working off of Velcro straps here, and this boot has done a pretty good job at staying put. I haven't had any heel slip issues on it, so if you are a fan of booty style construction shoes for your barefoot shoes, training shoes, etc., I think that's also a perk of this model. The third pro that I have with this shoe is if you like a little bit more structure to your barefoot shoes. So if you like having an outsole that's a little thicker, and you like having a removable insole and just a bit more beef to your shoe's upper, I think this model will be a hit for you. It kind of reminds me of the Vivo Barefoot Modus Strength in the sense of being a little bit more rigid, a little bit more built out. And so if that is something you want with your barefoot shoe, I could see this being an awesome option for that need. It's going to give you a little bit more of like a structured feeling on the sole versus something like a Tolos Archetype 2.0 that's going to be a lot more minimalist, or even a Vivo Barefoot Primus Lite 3, where it at least feel a lot more minimalist regarding the stack height and thickness. So overall, this could be a good shoe for that ask as well. But now let's talk about a few cons that I have with the DropZero Barefoot Trainer. So 3 cons that I have with this model is number 1, I'm honestly just not stoked on the price of this shoe. So with the power straps, I think it limits this model's functionality outside of the gym, and it looks very much like a deadlift shoe. So in my mind, if you're buying this shoe just for lifting and training, you can find models that will cost less and give you more range outside of the gym, or even just buy a deadlift slipper, which looks very similar to this, for a lot less. So this is not a barefoot shoe that I think everybody needs to run out and buy right away. I think there are very specific contexts where it makes a lot of sense, but this is not a shoe that I'm gonna go out and recommend to everybody. The second con that I have with the shoe is with the strap system. I'm just not that big of a fan of how the forefoot lays up here. So you have this heavier TPU layer here and the strap, and what ends up happening is the break of the shoe then is very kind of awkward when breaking this model in, and I worry that if you have, for example, smaller feet, this might be a little bit more aggressive, because in other barefoot shoes that I've tried, sometimes the break can feel super uncomfortable if this TPU overlay comes too far into the lateral and medial side, and this is something that I could see bothering other folks with. The third con that I have with this shoe is while it can work for cross training, this is not going to be your best barefoot shoe for doing things like CrossFit workouts and whatnot, where you're going to have some abrasion on the top of the shoe. With these straps, I could see them coming undone, and because this Velcro doesn't go all the way down to give you additional security if you have to really crank these tight, and because we don't have Velcro all the way to the end of these straps, I could see them kind of peeling off if you're doing something like a rope climb or something in this model, and you want to use it for something other than just strength training and lifting and some cross training with like plyos and whatnot. So this model's functionality in the gym will have some limitations as well. It's good for lifting, decent for cross training, but if you're wanting a barefoot shoe for CrossFit, this is not going to be your best bet, despite having a little bit more of a structured and rigid feeling to it. But now let's talk about the performance of the TYR DropZero. To discuss the performance of this shoe, I'll discuss how they do for lifting, cross training, short runs, and daily wear. In the context of lifting, the shoe does a good job, and that's where I think the shoe is going to excel the most. So if you do invest in this model, understand that I think its performance is going to be a lot more biased towards traditional strength training. Its TYRTac is going to give you a nice grip on rubber gym floors, wooden platforms, whatever surface you're training on. Even on turf, this shoe does a pretty good job. And then also, you do get a good level of articulation with this model, and you have a decently wide forefoot. So that said, if you're buying the shoe specifically for lifting, you should be pretty set in this model. Now the removable insole doesn't have a finished internal construction, so this is likely a barefoot shoe that you're going to want to leave that insole in with. And so with its thicker outsole, if you want as much ground feel as possible and to get as close to the ground as possible, that would be something to consider with the shoe, because you can't take that insole out. Models like the Advances Apex Power 1.5, the Tolos Archetype 2.0, even the Vivo Barefoot Primus Lite 3 could be better options movements in this context. Also for lifting, I do like the power strap system for the most part. It gives you a decent amount of security and I haven't had issues yet. Now I am a little bit concerned about the long-term durability of these straps just because I wish the Velcro was a little bit more aggressive or extended down a little bit for folks who have to crank the shoe tight, but thus far for lifting, it's done a pretty good job. In the context of cross training, the shoe also does a pretty good job. So if you want a shoe, for example, for jump rope, some dumbbell snatches, some Metcon work, where it's not gonna be so abrasion focused on the top of the shoe, it should do a good job. So it does give you a nice level of articulation and ground feel for things like plyometrics, and it does have a good level of support for lateral movements like skater strides and whatnot. My only concern with this shoe for cross training, and this is also my concern with short runs, is with the aggressive material up here in the forefoot, the break isn't the most comfortable. And if you're somebody that wants that very like sock-like fitting barefoot shoe, that's where this shoe I don't think is gonna be a hit for you. And so keep that in mind. And so if you want that barefoot shoe for cross training that feels very sock-like and very, very minimalist on the feet, and you want as much ground feel as possible, I don't think the DropZero is gonna necessarily hit for that ask. For short runs, I would say probably pass on this shoe for two reasons. Number one, once again, the forefoot break isn't the best. And number two, with these straps, I could see them actually breaking down faster if you're doing a ton of running into them, dumping a bunch of sweat into this Velcro. So not my favorite shoe for running. If you want to do some sprints here and there or some short intervals, they'll probably be fine, but this is not going to be my barefoot shoe that I would say, oh yeah, if you want to run, like go out and buy this model. I think you could do better regarding your pick. And then for daily wear, I'm also not the biggest fan of this shoe. It just looks way too sporty and like a deadlift slipper for me. Like this is not gonna be a shoe I'm wearing out to a coffee shop. I think the power straps look pretty silly. I am stoked to see the model come out with the laces in the next few months because I think that will add to the reason to buy this shoe, give you a little bit more versatility and transcend just the gym. But from a daily wear context, can you wear this shoe? Obviously, you can wear any shoe for daily wear, but that doesn't mean it's gonna look good in every outfit and setting, and that's where I think this model takes a hit regarding its appearance, and that's due to the power strap and more deadlift slipper look it has. So when talking about the price of the DropZero, you can expect to pay $150 USD for all of the colorways, sans the white and gold colorway. So the Squat U colorway costs $160, and to be quite honest with you, I think that price point is high for what this shoe offers. Is it a decent shoe in the gym? Sure. But I think for most folks who are buying a barefoot shoe for training, they probably also want that shoe for a little bit of everything else, or at least wearing out and about on a daily wear basis and not looking super out of place. And that's where I think this shoe's price can take a hit. So hopefully with the lace model, that adds to the ability to kind of get more out of your value with this shoe. But honestly, $150, $160 for this shoe, I think is just kind of high. I would rather go with a Tolos, a Vivo Barefoot model, or even a Zero Shoes model that's gonna give me more range outside of the gym, or even like a Freet Vibe I like a lot for giving me that kind of gym / daily wear performance, and then also costing less. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the TYR DropZero? So number one, I think if you're somebody who just plans to lift in your shoes and you just want that barefoot shoe to slip on when you get into the gym and do your strength training sessions, this model can be a good pick. I think it's gonna be a plenty fine model for that context, and you get a nice level of ground feel with this shoe, and you get a good level of grip in this model, which I think will hit for most folks, especially those who aren't super particular on getting the most ground feel or getting as close to the ground as possible. The second context where I could see the shoe making sense is if you like booty style shoes that are really easy to get on and you kind of like those traditional deadlift slipper straps, but you want a shoe that's not necessarily a deadlift slipper and a little bit more built out like a formal shoe, that's where this model I think could also make a lot of sense. So for example, if you're a power lifter and you don't want to just invest in a deadlift slipper and kind of have it be limited to that context, but you do like the strap systems and whatnot, I think this model can fill that void, and it gives you a little bit more functionality regarding its performance for cross training and whatnot. Now, who shouldn't buy this shoe? Number one, I think if you want a shoe for anything outside of just training, I would say look into other models. You can find models for the same price or even cost less that are going to give you more functionality in different settings, in my opinion. And number two, if you are looking for a barefoot shoe for running or CrossFit, I would say probably pass on this shoe as well. For CrossFit, sure, they can work, but I'm just worried with these straps overall if you have a lot of abrasion on the upper part of the shoe. So just keep that in mind, that if you do use this shoe for CrossFit, if you're having a lot of friction, Velcro straps can have some issues there. So just want to put that out there, that it might not be the most dialed shoe for that context. You could obviously always use whatever shoe you have for it, but it doesn't mean it's going to be optimal or worth your investment if that's a big ask for you. All right, so when talking on the sizing and fit of the TYR DropZero, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in this model. The length runs pretty true. I have about like a ½ inch of room at the end of my toe box. I have an E-width foot, and the width is also fine in this shoe for my foot anatomy, regardless of the sock thickness I'm wearing. So I think for most foot anatomies, True to size will be a good call, and I also like that there's not a super aggressive taper or arch in this model as well, which could also be a great thing for folks with flatter feet. All right, so when talking about the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in this model, for my size 10 model here, we have a weight of 10.2 ounces. This model has a 0mm heel to toe drop. There's not a ton of toe spring in this shoe, which I do like. You get a little bit, but it's not as aggressive as other models for training. And this model does have a thin foam removable insole, but again, there is no finished internal construction in this shoe. All right, now let's go over the construction of the TYR DropZero Barefoot Trainer. So on the upper of this shoe, you have a mesh that runs throughout the entirety of the shoe. It has this knit booty construction back here, and it's pretty breathable through the forefoot and midfoot with these ventilation pockets. You have a power strap system, so you have some thicker, like TPU layers here, synthetic layers that kind of anchor this lateral midfoot. This wraps around the toe box as well, and this extends into the midfoot. It kind of reminds me, like the midfoot construction, at least with this textile overlay, reminds me of some of the constructions used in Vivo Barefoot models. The power strap system has two straps here. So as you can see, this Velcro is pretty fine. It doesn't wrap down the farthest. I wish this would be extended a little bit. Maybe I should add that into my next section where I talk about what I would do to improve the shoe. And then also you have these straps here with this Velcro top layer that don't really have anything anchoring them down. So I'm almost nervous that if these get clipped or just kind of get dirty, or let's say you're having to wrap them super far because you have a lower volume foot, this could actually lack some security for you. So keep that in mind if you know you have a low volume foot and you're looking into the shoe. You have an external heel tab back here with some TYR branding on the heel and on the tongue. Looking at the outsole, so you have this pretty aggressive and thick outsole. This wraps around the lateral part, toe box, and medial side of the shoe, so it does give you a nice bit of structure around the outskirts of this model. And this is built with TYRTac outsole construction, so basically it's like TYR's proprietary way to give this shoe grip. And this model does have, once again, a removable insole. If you have additional questions on this model's construction, drop a comment down below. So before I close out this review, I do want to talk about things that I would do to the shoe to change it, to make it a little bit better. And these are obviously just my suggestions based off of the countless barefoot shoes I've reviewed. So there are three things I would do to tweak this shoe. Number one, I would reconfigure this midfoot brake, or at least this strap anchor, because I think it's going to be uncomfortable for certain foot anatomies. Number two, I would actually make the internal part of the shoe finished so you don't have as much of an open stitch here. So if you ever want to train with the insole out, you don't have to necessarily worry about breaking this down at a faster rate. And then number three, I actually feel like the outsole could be a little bit better. So I think if these lugs were just a tiny bit more aggressive, it almost spread out a tiny bit, dare I say, I think you would get a little bit more bite out of the shoe. The grip is good nonetheless, but I do think you could get a little bit more grip with this TYRTac if the lugs were reconfigured a little bit. But again, I'm just a lowly reviewer, but those are things that I would do to make this shoe just a little bit better. All right guys, that wraps up my review of the TYR DropZero Barefoot Trainer. Overall, it's an okay shoe. It performs well for strength training, but outside of that context, I'm having a tough time getting behind the price of this shoe, especially for folks who want more versatility. If you have additional questions on the DropZero, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.